my book.
She didn't either. She did.
No, I don't need it. It's
Okay.
just a good example of mostly about the book. What I highlight is I've got pages that I've marked off with those post-it note things as the pages that I need to refer to most frequently. And I recommend that. There are things that even I don't remember, and so I have to look up quite often, and so it's just a helpful thing to mark those pages off. Like the page with the table of all the different ways you cite in text, depending on the number of authors. It's a good page to thing. So APA is important, but there are some caveats to that. So it can be ambiguous. There is always room for interpretation. One of those interpretation points I usually highlight is the difference between, so APA says that you use the percent sign, whereas I prefer stylistically in my research to spell out percent because it reads better to me, and my paper's not scientific. But it's always good to know the rules so that when you bend them and somebody asks you to correct them, you know that that's what you should do. So again, it's a bit like professors, and this could be journal article editors and all of that, expect to bend to their rules, to their interpretations. Yeah, so basically these are the rules, but some of them can waver sometimes, which is kind of counterintuitive, but you know. So the general stuff, and this is some stuff that I've been seeing in papers over and over too, so knowing the generals of 1-inch margins, and it's double spaced, 12-point Times New Roman font, and I can look at a paper and tell you if it's Times New Roman or not. So you get used to it so much so that you can tell when it's not it. So the 2 spaces after the period nonsense. Did you know technically you weren't supposed to be taught that? It's an outdated thing. It was
2 spaces or 1?
2 spaces. It was taught because of typewriters, and once typewriters were no more, there was no purpose in continuing to teach it. And I didn't even know 2 spaces were a thing until grad school. So, which is why I clearly think that 1 space is superior. APA says you can do either, and there's a lot of, I've even seen lately some talk about how APA says you have to use 2, and that's not true. It recommends that you use 2, but you don't have to. So stick with your guns. It's really something difficult to retrain yourself to do anyway, and so the one thing I will tell 2 spacers is that be careful, because often 2 spacers do 3 and 4 spaces on accident. And also, when we get to the references, there's only 1 space after punctuation and references. So you have to pay attention to that habit. There's always a title page, unless your assignment says it's not required. We'll go through the page heading. I have an example. And please, 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 Oxford or series comma, please, please, please. AP doesn't use the series comma, the Oxford comma, and it makes things very confusing. Case in point, without the Oxford comma, we've made Lincoln and Washington into rhinoceros. Is rhinoceri, I guess. So the comma is important. To go further on the importance of commas can save lives. So pay attention to your commas. They are important, they're useful, and they change the meaning of a sentence drastically. There's another meme using Stalin and Hitler. It's not suitable for an academic environment, but I encourage you to look it up. Just go under go Oxford comma and go to images. Yeah. Okay, so title page. Your title page should have running head, and then in all caps the beginning of your title. Doesn't have to be. It shouldn't be the whole thing. And then the page number. And this changed between 5th and 6th edition. So when certain professors who know the older editions tell you no number on the first page, point out that the number is supposed to be on the first page now.
So tell them they're outdated.
Yes.
You're old.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then centered the title, your name, and your affiliation. Nothing else matters.
So is it still supposed to be in the middle of the page then?
This is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This is
Like, oh, you just did it for this.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't have to be.
Oh, okay.
Put some space, but it doesn't have to be dead set
Dead
in the
center.
middle. Yeah.
Okay.
That I've never seen anybody say anything about
Okay.
where that is actually. So the body of the paper, and this is something I've seen quite often too. The text is continuous, so don't put extra spaces between your paragraphs. And this is something you can put in your settings. You go under paragraph and you click don't put extra spaces. When you're reading student papers, it reads as if you're trying to get extra space so you don't have to write as much. Use headings. So the heading levels and the first 3 levels are the only levels you really need to concern yourselves about. I've never used the 4th level, so I don't expect students to actually get there. This is for your reference. I'll give this PowerPoint to Emily to post wherever, but I've got an example of the headings here. So the first level is centered. The second level is bold and all caps there. Each word is capitalized and left justified. And then the third level is just the first word capitalized, a period, and then text begins right after that period. This bit I didn't learn until a couple of years ago. I always put the text on the next level. So, yep.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
So the paper I just submitted for your class, we had case overview and then suggestions.
Mhm.
Each of those would be in the middle.
If it's a major, if it's like if it's its own section, yes.
Okay.
It would be first level heading.
Okay.
So like in
I
a
messed
research
up on
paper,
that.
you would have introductions, then you had lit review would be centered, methods would be centered, that kind of thing.
Okay. So okay.
So after you get past the title page, the header is just the title, no more running head, and then of course the page numbers.
So the header is different for the title page versus the body?
Yes.
Just to
And-
make things more complicated.
Yes.
And there's actually like in Word, there's a little check mark where it's like first page different, and that's all you need to click.
Okay.
Just make sure you click that before you type anything because it gets really frustrating.
Yeah, I did that once and it was frustrating.
Tyler?
Do you, as an APA professional, have an issue with the Microsoft Word template that they've offered?
I've never used it, so I don't know
Okay.
that I do have an issue.
Okay. Because they do I don't know if I have the newest word or I don't know what word I have, but there's a APA style paper
seen that.
template, and it sets up the header and pages and all that stuff for you. So.
It might be too extensive for the assignments that you do.
Okay.
For instance, APA will say that an abstract is always necessary, whereas in most class
Okay.
papers that's not something. So you might have to delete some stuff, but templates are actually really good. I avoided a lot of headaches that my fellow classmates went through because I used the dissertation template and plugged everything in. And then I was like, I didn't have any problem, guys. What's wrong with yours? So they liked me for that. Okay, so moving into citations, and this is important. Every source cited in text must be included in the reference list, and then conversely, every citation listed in the references must be cited in text. So don't put anything in the references that you just looked at to help inform where you're at. It has to be actually cited in the paper to be in the references. And then you always have to cite, this is the epistemology discussion. How do you know what you know? You know nothing without some source. And so, paraphrase meaning whenever you refer to any idea from an author. So if, like for instance, I say women academics are underrepresented in higher education, I have to provide some citations for that. Even though I know it from everything that I've read, I still have to back it up with a source. And so just making sure that you always are cognizant of that. There's nothing out there that is general knowledge. It came from somewhere. So, and then of course direct quotes. So this is an example of the 40 or more words indented quote, and it's very different than the ones in text because there are no quotation marks, first of all, and the period goes after the number, and the page number doesn't have a P in front of it. It's just the page number. It's completely different from when you just in text less than 40 words, which messes people up sometimes. And also, one thing I recommend highly is when you have to move your text, use the ruler, don't use tab. And that is because if anybody that's looking at your paper adjusts anything and you didn't use the ruler, the format goes all over the place. So the ruler is the best way to prevent things from getting messed up.
What about the indent at the top? It's not a tab, it's an indent.
Yeah, I'd still use the ruler.
Just curious.
Because when I was in my master's degree, one of my professors always told me that she knew when I used tab, and I was like, how does she know? And she knows because when you go to edit something, or if you click on the text at all, and you look up at the ruler, so if you just click your cursor into the text, you can see if the ruler's been moved or not. So it's just something to help with formatting, and so errors don't occur. Okay, so more about paraphrasing. Citations are required when you restate a passage from a source in your own words. When you express essential information or present a fact or idea supported by research. So basically a lot of most everything. There is a such thing as too many citations, but it's difficult to get there. So always default to citing your stuff to protect yourself, because this is all about, particularly the citations, is all about protecting yourself from plagiarism. Okay, so this is an example of the differences. So this is a direct quote here, and this is where I've paraphrased and I'm citing many articles to support my facts. And so you see the difference between the 40 or more word quote to this one. The quotations are there, and then at the end, you put the quotations first, and then you put the name, the date, and the page number, and there's a P there, and then the period. Yeah.
The end of the quote doesn't need any punctuation?
No.
Okay.
The period after the citation is considered that punctuation.
Okay.
And then here is an example here of having the same author in two different works. And so when you have the same author in two different works, you just separate them by a comma rather than the semicolon that separates each author. And like this one's 2011A because I had two different sources from this author in the same year. And if I was citing both of those, it would be 2011A, 2011B, not just A, B. When I was going through, this is from my dissertation, when I was going through finding examples, I found a bunch of errors and it stressed me out last night.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you gonna talk about the A and the B thing in the reference part?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Okay, so more about in-text. So one or two authors, you use both names and the date each time you reference them. Between 3 and 5 authors, the first citation looks like this, and after that, all citations are the et al. And the et al is, there's no period or punctuation after et, there's a period after all with a comma, and then the date. And then any work with 6 or more authors is always the et al.
That holds true throughout the duration of the rest of the paper,
Yes.
not just the rest of the paragraph.
Right. It's kind of like when you spell out something and then you put the acronym in parentheses. It's the same kind of concept. Once you've done it, you continue forward with the second version. Okay. Any questions about in-text citation?
Oh, yeah, one. So, for example, if I interviewed somebody, I interviewed Erwin, I don't actually put that in my references, but that's an in-text citation.
Yes. it's a
Unless somebody
personal
explicitly
communication.
tells you to put it in your
Right.
references. Okay.
It's you put it in parentheses, personal communication, and then the date.
Yeah.
Heather?
If you reference the author of a source in your text by name, then you need to parentheses just the year.
Mm-hmm.
So then does that year reference go right after the name of the author that you cite in your writing, or at the end of the sentence?
Right after the name of the author.
Okay.
And in a little bit, I'll give you the APA quiz that some of you have already had because you've had classes with me, but it has the answer key on it, so provides some of the answers to some of these things. So references is, and if you don't know how to use page breaks yet, it's just insert, breaks, and then page break, and it moves wherever your cursor is to the next page. And that's what you should do for references. The word references should be centered and not bold. So don't use works cited or anything else. It's always references with APA. References are double spaced, which I told my class last night the opposite. So, you know, this stuff gets confusing, and so it's good to have a handy something to reference. So references, the first line is left justified, and the second line and further lines are indented. And again, just highlight all and then move the ruler and it's done. So it's pretty easy there. References should be in alphabetical order, and then when two works by the same author, order by oldest year first. And again, when we get to that 2011 A and B, make sure you determine which one's A and B early on, and then in your references there'll be A and B. Does
Do
that
you
make
like
sense?
put the year and then A?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just
Sure.
continuous.
I'm in the process of writing a paper with that, and I'm like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
So.
It's just make sure that you're consistent
Okay.
with which one it is,
Okay.
and it goes in alphabetically just like everything else. So, but yeah, the date and then right next to it the letter.
But you don't put the A and the B actual on the citation on the reference page, but only in the reference
No,
within the
on the
body?
reference page.
On the reference as well?
Yeah, we're on the reference page section now. Because the whole point of references is to provide the reader with where you've gotten the information from, and so the more clarity you provide in terms of access of where the reader can get that stuff, the better. Any other questions so far? So APA references, only the first word in titles are capitalized, and then first words after punctuation like a colon, so the title and then the subtitle, only the first word. Found the mistakes in my references too. It's gonna haunt me forever. Except proper names, so proper names are always the exception. Book and journal titles are italicized, article titles are not. There's no, in APA there aren't any quotations or anything like that in the references. That's different from other styles. Okay, so this is an example of a journal article reference, and one of the things that's important is knowing that there's a space between it doesn't make sense whatsoever, but there's a space between the initials. And then when you go to, so here's an example of the capitalization after the colon, capitalized. When there's a question mark in the title, that's the punctuation. There's no period after that. So that's something that messes people up sometimes. And then when you're italicizing, the journal title is italicized, and so is the volume number, but the issue number is not. Again, doesn't make sense really. But these are the rules. And then the page number, there's no P in front of the page number for journals. it's not in the,
Yeah. Thanks.
PowerPoint has
Yeah.
restrictions that.
Oh, I know.
Word does not. Yeah.
Just giving you a hard time.
I know, it's okay. It's still early in the day.
It is.
It is.
So, book references are the easiest ones to remember. One thing that changed in the 6th edition is you have to put the state, even when the city is well known. You still have to put the state. And for different countries or different cities in other countries, you put the city and then the country. But that is one thing that is different. Always remember to put the state abbreviation in there. And like I said, books are pretty easy. The title of the book is italicized. You put the location and then the publisher at the end. Do you have a question?
Do you have an example of like if it's a book written by or edited by okay. Sorry.
It's cool.
Yes.
So an edited book chapter, so a book, and I use this example because the book editors are also the author of what I cited, so it's important, even when they're the same, to still do it as an edited book. And so you do the title of the article like you would any other journal article, and then after that, there's a period, and then you put in, and then you reverse. You put the first initial first, then the last name. Yeah. And then you put in parentheses, eds, and E is always capitalized there with a period. So if it's just one editor, it's just ED period. And then you put comma, and then the title. And the title is italicized. The page numbers aren't. So then you put PP for pages, and then the page numbers. And then again, just like any other book, the place and the publisher. Yeah.
Thank you for doing this because this always messes me up.
I've gotten pretty good. I can do these without looking anything up now. So the last 3 that I've shown I can do without looking it up, but it takes some time to figure it out because it's backwards, kind of like a lot of the rules are when you do it in a different format. So the last one I have is an online reference, and this goes to anything you find. Like if you find a page where it provides you an article and there's an author to cite, you put the author's name instead of AAP there. But if there's no author, then you put the organization or as much as you can tell. So the whole point of this is to give as much information as possible to provide the reader a way to find the source. For instance, this link no longer works, but if they use the title and look at the year, then they can figure out where it came from. So if I had spelled this out as the author, then when I get to this point, you just put author as the publisher instead of redoing it. But since I did the acronym, I spelled it out here. And then this is something I learned in my PhD. Retrieve from doesn't have any punctuation afterwards. It's just retrieve from, and then you paste the website. It doesn't make sense. There should be punctuation after that, but.
And then is there always a return, like it's retrieve from, return, and then
No,
the
you
website?
just paste it, and usually because it's one big site, it just goes to the
okay.
next line. And nothing is italicized here. But if it was like a brief or a report that I found from like a nonprofit or something, and there wasn't an author, or the report would be italicized because it's considered a book if it's a full report. Okay, that's all I've got, and then here, so these 3, and I don't know how you want to distribute this, Emily, but these 3 are workshop presentations that I cited, or that I used to put together this presentation, so they're really helpful, and they go more in depth than I did here, really go a lot further into the ins and outs of